Ultra.
Goes huge for Ultra, and they get their first home series victory.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Made in Esports. I'm one of your hosts, Spencer. With me is Chris. As you guys can see, we're doing our Call of Duty episode for the week, and I think there is no better episode to do other than to give our, updated power rankings. Last week we spoke about the Cinderella run that the Toronto Ultra were able to go on to get that sort of championship victory under their belts for Major 2. Now heading into Stage 3, how do we rank these teams and where do you see them moving forward?
But before we do that, make sure, if you like our content, to like and subscribe to Made in Esports. We really helps the YouTube algorithm get out to other people who like CDL and like hearing stuff just like what you're listening to. And you know what? If you guys have comments, if you think we're wrong about these new updated power rankings, comment below. We'd love to chat and talk about it.
Yeah, we got some hot takes here. Or at the very least, we got one real hot take. So I'm excited to hear you guys' opinion on that. The last thing I'll add before we get into this is, again, I know there's some movement changes. These aren't really taking that into consideration. I think it'd be too hard for us to try to accurately predict how certain teams are going to go up in standings versus down in standings based around the most recent slide cancel nerfs. In my opinion, I got to wait and see, right? And on one hand, I can make an argument that maybe more experienced teams like the LA Guerrillas or the Seattle Surge will see a bigger boost in things like this, where maybe a team like the Toronto Ultra, for instance, that maybe relies on that more fast, aggressive, individual child playstyles will maybe drop down further. But in my opinion, that's too speculative for this current time, and I'd rather just rank the teams how I think they're going to go going into Stage 3 as if that thing hadn't happened.
Yeah, I understand that. So let's go from 12 to 1. I want to really get an understanding of where this lies. So start off in number 12, and I think, hopefully everybody's in accordance with this. We got the LA, not the Thieves, the Guerrillas.
Yeah.
I was thinking LA Geos like Gladiators. No.
That's Overwatch, dude. Get that out of your head. In my opinion, number 12, they actually recently made a change where they got rid of, I think, their best player, and I don't think that's a hot take in any way, shape, or form. I think most people are in agreement that Vivid looked like generally one of the best SMGs in the league. I thought that this team was one change away where maybe you bring out a guy like Apathy and that's nothing against Apathy. Apathy, is a legend of the sport, but I do think if you want to add a little bit more pace to this team, you might look to bring in like a Decimate or somebody like that into the lineup. And instead, they almost went the exact opposite route where they brought in less pace. And again, with the most recent changes of the nerf of slide canceling, this might actually end up working. So again, It's really hard for me to tell. Like, I don't know if they knew about this beforehand or what the case was in regard to. Yeah, maybe. But if I was just going off of what I saw in Stage 2, I would have thought that Vivid was the guy to build around. And in fact, if you wanted anything, you maybe wanted to add more pace as opposed to lose it. So they brought in Chino, and we'll see how that works out. I could be wrong, but at this point, I have to put them at 12.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with you on that point. And I guess just going to our next one, let's just get this rolling. I think for us, it's going to be London Royal Ravens.
Actually, London's a good team. That's the problem. And that we're doing these rankings, and I'm like, how do we have London at 11? Because I think Paul X is a really good talent. I think he's got a lot of potential in this league. Same with Zap. Zed's a really good leader, and Shawnee's impressed me, to be honest, this season. I still think he maybe could arguably be one of the weaker pieces of this roster, but at the very least, like, I thought he was going to for sure be a weak piece moving into the year, and he's proved me wrong. So on paper, they got a pretty good team. I debated putting them 11th or 10th, but they ended up on 11th, and I think somebody just got to be 11th, and it had to be them. That's the best way I can put this.
I know, and just to give a little contrast, I think our next one is going to be Paris, and for me, I rated London one ahead of Paris, so I rated them 10th.
Tough call.
Paris 11th, and it is a really tough call, and I think we ended up going with London in 11th just because they have a little more established names. But just for me, for example, I'm not that confident in Aqua and Classic. That's why I really wanted to rank them 11th.
Yeah, Aqua's looked pretty good this year. That's the problem. I agree Classic has struggled a little bit, but Fire definitely had some up and down moments, so you got to get like Fire out there. I still think Fire's got potential in this league. I think we'll see him back next year, but
the thing is like, has Aqua look good purely because he's on a bad team, right?
No, I think he's looking good in general. Like, he's obviously he's competing against some of the best in the world. Like, I think he generally looked pretty good. I've been impressed with Aqua this year. So, I do think that if Temp's a good player when he hits the ceilings. I still think the roles are a little bit weird. I don't know if I love Tempa's that second SMG, especially alongside somebody like Classic. We'll see how that works out, but obviously they have more established names, and if this team gets firing on all cylinders, and I think Scraps looked really good this year, so again, somebody's got to be 11th, somebody's got to be 10th, and I think that's how it's rolled out.
Okay, yeah, maybe I can understand that. I think we're really like looking at a tier break in between LAG, and London, and then final team in this tier and the London Paris is going to be Florida. We're going to put Florida at number 9, unfortunately. And unfortunately, big fall from grace since last year, right?
Well, okay, so in terms of the fall from grace from last year, there was obviously some very unfortunate circumstances. I think debatably surrounding that, obviously, with Farrell passing away and whatnot. I think had he been on this roster, things a little bit different. I was a really big fan of his last year. But even when I had them going into the year, I do think that some people jumped on the Slack train. I think that Slack had a tough year, I'll be completely honest. I understand that he does some great things around the map. I understand he brings a lot in terms of his knowledge on how to play the game and his ability to make the correct decisions and shot call in real time. And again, maybe the most recent changes with the movement will help a guy like Slack for sure. Definitely, I know them going to land eventually by the end of the year will help a guy like Slack. But I didn't mind replacing Slack. If you had brought in somebody like Decimate, for instance, or a guy like Vivid's now available, like if you could have went out there and got a trade and brought in a guy like Vivid or brought in a guy like Mac when he was like quote unquote on the bench for that short period of time, it maybe would have made sense. I'm not sure if Havoc is the right guy to come in there and replace Slack. Now, I'm not saying he's not. He absolutely could be. I'm very curious to see how him and Neptuno work off of each other. It's going to be interesting. So they have potential to move higher because, again, I'm a big Skies and Awakening fan. I think both those guys got a lot of talent. I think Nepto has a pretty high ceiling. And I think Havoc's a good player. I think at this point, it's just that fit and getting that consistency together. That's going to be a big determining factor onto whether or not they can push themselves into that top 8 position or if they're going to continue to be on the outside looking in.
I understand that, and I also agree that Neptune has a big, high ceiling, but we just haven't seen him really even get to that ceiling, I don't think, this year yet. So I'm really interested to see how Havoc can, hopefully maybe enable Neptune to really get there. And that's, what I think will really get them a little bit higher in the rankings. But after that, we have I think here a tier break, and next, people may not believe it from the start of the season, but we have the Seattle Surge coming in hot.
I think people will believe from the beginning. Again, the reason I guess we kind of initially went whatever viral for saying this roster was overrated was because people had them in that top 4 discussion, right? Like Nameless makes a video about them being top 4 potential heat. I know it might have been a little bit clickbait, but still, people were like really high on this roster. I always thought they were a little bit overrated in terms of being a top 4 team, but I never thought they were going to be the worst team in the league. There's too much talent on this roster for them to be the worst team in the league. I think 8th is a pretty good position. They're obviously looking better. I was worried about the SMG lineup going into the year. I think the SMG lineup has been the issue with this team. Pristini was probably the most improved player in the league from stage 1 to stage 2. He went from, I think, really struggling to definitely improving himself and showing what he's capable of. So hopefully he can keep up that momentum. I still think Glooney needs to pick up the pace. I would still like to see him again play a little bit, put a little bit more map pressure on the map. But again, with these new movement changes, it's so hard to determine. Like that could really help a guy like Looney. Like as hard as we've been on Looney in the past, I think a big reason was again that map pressure. And now that slide canceling isn't really a thing, you might start to see these like more veteran players who play a slower style. Again, going back to land, start to see a lot more value, and all of a sudden this team could be, that dark horse that we said they were going to be originally, and potentially move themselves up the standings right now. At this point, I just haven't seen it, so it's tough. But Gunless will look really good. Octane still Octane. Yeah. Like this team.
I also think one of the big things that's changed, especially from the start of the year, because let's get serious, I think they've improved since the start of the season. Has been mindset. I think we said this before. This team can be make or break based off of how each player interacts with each other and how they really form a mindset to be able to win or lose. And I think that's really changed since the start of the season. They've really seen lots of these, as a kind of an old guard, old school Call of Duty team. Lots
kind
of
them are,
kind of. Lots of them are from, in my mind, have a longer tenure in Call of Duty than the upcoming Preds, the upcoming them, and stuff like that. I think they've looked at lots of these new upcoming people and really been able to change their mindset. Be like, okay, we really have to work in order to make this work.
Well, yeah, I think the thing was always with this team was just they had a lot of volatile pieces, right? Everybody knew Octane was going to be good. Octane's been good. Everybody knew what Gunless can do when he's firing at all cylinders. The question was, can he do it all year long? Right? That he's had issues with being consistent throughout an entire year in the past. Everybody knew what Looney could bring to the table. The question was he going to be able to keep up that map pressure and keep up that pace with some of these new up-and-coming young SMGs? And then everybody knew what Pristine looked like when he was, again, on top of his game. The problem with Pristine is, yeah, you get a lot of Stage 2 performances out of him, but every once in a while, you get Stage 1 performance. And you saw what happened when you got a Stage 1 Pristini. They were, the worst team in the league. So you've now gotten Stage 2 Pristini. Gunless is firing on all cylinders. If this team comes together, like, they have a lot of talent on that team. The question is, can they continue to fire at all cylinders throughout the year? If they can, I could see them, again, going on a run, getting a top 4, getting a top 6. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I think now we're even another tier break. Seattle's kind of on their own little tier. And we're here at LA Thieves. LA Thieves is a little bit of a hard one, right? Because they haven't been performing, but they made some really big changes. And the real question is, do you think LA Thieves, plus Draza, plus Venom is going to be better than LA Thieves with Temp and Slasher?
I think so. Tough. With the movement and land, you never know, right? The movement nerfs, the land could easily lend itself to you may want to bring Slasher back in because that's what he excels at, right? But the way that Call of Duty was being played in Stage 2, I think pace was a very big thing. You wanted pace, and you wanted some pretty high skill ceiling. I'm a big Draza fan. I never understood why Draza was benched this whole year. We actually talked about him when we first were like, who should Toronto Ultra go after in the offseason? I was like, dude, if Draza is available, go after him, right? He's a good player. So I was really excited to see him get his opportunity and frankly excel at it. I was a huge Venom fan. I'm not going to lie, I slept on him coming into the year, but obviously, as I've watched him in challenges, he's established himself as one of the best up-and-coming AMs. I think Kenny's elite, but that's not, everybody knows Kenny's elite. And TJ can still be that really good, ice in his veins, make some big plays on some big moments. So, I actually like this roster. 7 seems low, but the truth is I'm just really high in the 6 above them. I think they can be a really sneaky dark horse team.
Yeah, exactly. Now we're kind of getting more into a little bit of a hot take. These are a hot takes type of territory. And you aren't going to believe this, but at number 6, we're putting the Minnesota Roker.
I hate putting them at 6. I generally hate, if anyone's going to roast me for putting them at 6, I mean, fair enough. This is really hard. This is like...
Yeah, it was.
This is like by far I was like, who's 6? And we had Minnesota. I was like, how is Minnesota 6? I'm really high on this roster. I seriously think Minnesota could win Stage 3. That's how high I am on this roster, and they're at 6. I think that just goes to show how competitive this league is, especially at the top portion of the league, because this team's got a great roster on paper. When they brought in Stanley, which is what I said they should do back in the scouting series, everybody can kind of play their role. They can play with pace. They can play those ratty angles, run the routes. They got leadership. They got young up-and-coming talent. They got high skill. They got good S&D. They got good respawn. They got generally everything. It's a really well-rounded team. The only reason they're not higher is because I'm this new roster of New York, which is spoiler at number 5, I'm a really big fan of. But make no mistake, putting Minnesota at 6 is not underrating them in any way, shape, or form. They could easily be a top 2, top 3 team. I just don't know how to rank them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, being, a jockey of all trades mean that they're a master of none, maybe has hurt them a little bit.
That's not even true, though, because they're a really good search team. You could argue they're a top 4 search team. They are a master at that. They're a really well-rounded team.
Yeah, but how do they play against Toronto in Major and Search?
Yeah, but Toronto was the best search team in the Major, though. That's not fair, right? Toronto, I don't think they dropped one map to FaZe in a 9-set series.
You wouldn't think that Rush would just keep on winning in Search, but they do. I digress, though. Let's get to number 5. And this is debatably our hot takes NYSL, and it's a little hard one, right? Because very technically their performance could be improved a bit. They got 3-0 by LA Thieves, which we ranked literally 2 places lower than them. We got 3-0 by Dallas Empire, which to be honest is higher, but still 3-0.
You'd like to see a more competitive game.
You want to see see more competitive game, but honestly, I think they just had a poor majors. I think with their new pickup of Mac,
not Mac, Hydra. Sorry,
Hydra.
Technically Mac, because Mac was benched and then brought back on, but obviously
that's what I mean.
Hydra came in, yeah.
I mean Hydra as well, but we have Mac and Hydra, and Hydra's debatably one of the best up and coming AMs we've seen. I mean, he is in a less competitive region, but he is one of the better AMs that we've seen pop up recently. And I'm just so high on Clayster and Mac and Asim, dude. I think Asim is not enough people are talking about him.
I think they are
I don't
now,
think
to be
that's
fair.
good.
I think they weren't at the beginning of the year. When
Yeah,
we made
you're
that
right.
video and we put Asim's face on the thumbnail and we were like, Toronto Ultra should pick up Asim, I think that's when he was being underrated. But you're right. He's performed incredibly well. I think people have recognized over how good Asim is. To me, the reason, like, again, if you look at the performance in Major 2, this team should not be number 5. We should have Minnesota here. We've been singing Hydra's praises since March of last year, right? March of Modern Warfare. This is not Clayster tweeted him out in September. That's when I started looking up Hydra. Like, again, Ultra Update was Eric Potsy's guy who's been on the show. Ran a Twitter account called Ultra Update, I believe. It was actually one of his coaches in Tier 2, right? Like, this guy was, I talked to Eric, obviously, about some of the up-and-coming AMs, like way back in Modern Warfare, and Hydra was somebody he kept talking about, and I looked into myself, and I was like, this guy's really talented. I've been a Hydra fan for a long time, and I am very, very excited to see him finally get a shot. This guy's got insane talent, and I think the 4 of Clayster, Hydra, and Makasim, I'm putting them at 5 because I haven't seen it yet, but I think their ceiling is higher than that. I want to make that very clear. If there's any team that I think is outside of the top 4 that could win a major. I know I said it was Minnesota, but like there's a reason why I have New York ahead of Minnesota. Like this team has some serious upset potential. I'm very excited to see them perform. Now it might take a stage for them to get that communication thing under order. I know Hydra is French. I don't know how great his English is. I don't think it's terrible, but I know it's not obviously his natural language. It is what it is, but his talent is absolutely there, and I'm very excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I think, I agree with all that. I mean, next up, this is where it gets a little tougher. I put out a post recently to Reddit, and people are ranking Toronto really, really, really highly, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I think 1 and 2 is a little high. But we're going to put a number 4 Optic. And yeah, Spencer, explain to me why
People are so down on Optic, man. I understand that their stage 2 performance wasn't the best. I think they went 2 and 3, and they obviously get beat by Ultra, and they lose that heartbreaking match to Minnesota. And but I think because it's Optic and everybody wants like chip or bust, that they're like roasting this team. This is still an elite team. I think you could have argued they're still a number 3 team. I have to put obviously certain teams ahead of them just because of where they've placed most recently and where they've placed, I think, in the past. But Optic could win stage 3, make no doubt about it. This is still an elite team. This is one of those teams that we always said might have a bit of a lull midway through the year because of just their veteran prowess. This is going to be a team to watch, especially when it comes to LAN. The movement could definitely benefit this team, right? This is another team that could be really scary and benefit from that like lack of slide canceling. So I think people like are hating on Optic right now. They got too much talent. They got too many established veterans, too many established top tier players for me to put them outside my top 4. I just have faith that this team is going to be good. Whereas I could see some other teams potentially falling off.
Teams have bad streaks. Honestly, Spencer freaking convinced me to put Toronto ahead of Optic. And I was genuinely like, maybe we should put them 4th.
Maybe,
Toronto
but it's
4th.
tough because they won them. It's tough because Optic went 2 and 3 and then lost to Toronto, right? So it's like, it's kind of like, how do you argue it? I do agree that Optic's a safer pick. Like, who's more likely to drop off? If I said, Chris, who's more likely to become 8th next stage? Like, let's just say either Toronto or Optic is 8th next stage. I'd probably say Toronto, right? It's going to be the team that's more likely to fall off. But at this point, 1, we're a Toronto podcast, so fuck it. But also 2, it's tough to argue. The last time I saw them play, Toronto beat them 3-1.
I know. And for me, I just think more long term, right? The core of their teams played crazy last year. They're amazing. So when I think about Optic, I think about the timeline of 2020 season as well as 2021 season.
Yeah,
and hey, if you have a shitty stage, you have a shitty stage, right? And I think about the core of Toronto, and they won a chip last year, but that was the kind of peak, right? And
was it? They won a chip this year, so I don't know if it was. Hey, Kleenex came into this roster. Kleenex won 73% of his maps in Modern Warfare and looked like one of the best SMGs in the world this most recent event. How is the move? If the movement nerfs are going to hurt any team, I think it's going to be Toronto because I do think they relied on that very fast playstyle, child-heavy playstyle. But the way that Call of Duty was being played, Cammy and Kleenex were on another level. Insight was a great fit for that team in terms of being able to read map pressure. Excuse me. The question was, can Bans keep up sort of being able to play both that route kind of SMG, rowdy SMG player, as well as continually keeping up that map pressure. And if they could, you saw it. They can be the best team in the league. They literally just won a championship. So it's hard for me to put them below because they just beat them. But I do agree that this was a tough 3. Honestly, the 3, 4, 5, 6 was really hard to rank.
Yeah, you're right. So yes, as you guys may know, we have Toronto Ultra at number 3. Now I know a lot of you ranked, Ultra as 1 or 2. I'm just gonna say I'm thinking more long term.
Yeah, what's the safer bet? Like, I don't know how after this weekend you put Toronto, I think, ahead of Dallas. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong, they beat Dallas 3-1, but the previous major, they didn't, right? Like, the previous major, Ultra came 8th and Dallas came 2nd. And then, like, last year, this was the championship. They won champs, right? So, like, in my opinion, Dallas is still probably the better team. Like, if you said who's more likely to win the next major, Toronto or Dallas, if gun to my head, I'm picking Dallas. Yeah. I would want Toronto, but, like, I think that's not a hot take in any way, shape, or form. This team is always going to be a team that, like, they're smart, very smart players, right? They can figure some things out with Crim6 there. Like, they're going to improve as the year goes along. The only interesting part is, again, another player who might get hurt by the movement nerfs, like Hukin Shotzi, right? Shotzi, very known for his ability, his top-tier movement, the slide canceling. That was what Shotzi was known for. Is this potential nerf to the movement going to hurt this team as well? Maybe. Yet to be seen, but in my opinion, it's so speculative, it's tough. But this is, don't get me wrong, it's a really good team.
And just to talk about, obviously, Toronto versus, Chicago, Toronto versus Dallas, I still genuinely think that now that we have a lot more eyes on Toronto, it wasn't, we're not looking at stage 1 Toronto anymore. I feel like lots of people are going to spend more time on them, trying to figure them out, trying to make sure they can counter their strategy. So I feel like Toronto is going to have a little bit tougher time than they did.
I agree.
In stage 2. So I think that is something to consider. But I mean, obviously, you guys know who we put as number 1. If anybody debates FaZe isn't number 1, I think they've lost their marbles, heads in the sky.
They're sipping the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, they're sitting the Toronto Kool-Aid because they probably put Toronto ahead of FaZe, but still FaZe number 1. Like, really, let's get serious. Like, they had one bad game against Toronto. They had one bad series against Toronto.
Not even a bad series. They lost 5-3. They still look great, right? FaZe is the best team in the league. They were my number 1 team going in. Everybody was putting Dallas number 1. I came on here. I said, y'all are sleeping on FaZe. They're the best team in the league. They have 4 of the best players. I think that you could argue they have like the best player at every position. Now, that's probably a hot take, but they have a top 3 player at every single position. Selim is amazing. RC is amazing. Simpin and BZ are the best SMG duo we have. They can play high pace. 3. They can slide cancel. They know fundamental Call of Duty. They play their trades well. They provide map pressure. They have everything.
They're the best trading team in the league. I feel like if there's one thing I could say they're best at, they're amazing at trading.
They're good at so many things. So there's not much more I can say. I don't want to gas them up. Like, I have nothing more to add. I think everybody knows that they're the best team in the league, and they're still my picks to win stage 3. If I had to be realistic, they're going to win stage 3. I would pick them to win stage 4. I'd pick them to win champs. That's just
it's that simple.
Yeah.
Well, hey, look at guys. What I want you to do, I know some of you guys have some comments on our spicy take about NYSL. Please put that in the comments below. Tell me what your thoughts are. We'll debate you to the end of the freaking moon.
Yeah, I don't even know how spicy it is. Honestly, I'm thinking about it now. Maybe it's not that spicy. Maybe I'm overhyping how spicy it is. I just felt like the safe way was to put them 7 because they just got 3-0 by the LA Thieves, but who knows? Maybe people do actually rate them highly, but in my opinion, this is a really good team, so we'll see.
Anyway, guys, well, hey, once again, if you like your content, please give a like, subscribe. Really helps us out in being able to push out content to other like-minded people just like you guys.
And as always, guys, thank you for watching and enjoy.